Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest CTO Craft Bytes. Today we will discuss trust and psychological safety and why trust comes before everything else. If this is your first time at a CTO Craft Bytes, let me just tell you a little bit more about what they do. CTO Craft provides a learning and mentoring community for senior technology leaders with a community of thousands of leaders, annual conferences, mentoring groups, and one-to-one coaching, as well as exclusive courses and workshops through the campus platform. Community membership is free, so if you're leading technology teams, you should definitely get involved. I'm Emma, I'm a technology and transformation leader and coach, and today I am joined in conversation with Michelle McDaid. Michelle, do you want to introduce yourself for us?
Thanks, Emma. Delighted to be here. So my background is leading tech teams. I've been based in Dublin, and I have worked mainly in fintech and HR tech. My last role was senior director of engineering at WorkHuman. I set up a business called The Leading Place, and it's really around supporting companies and organizations to create workplaces where everyone can thrive. So, psychological safety and trust is a big thing here. And I became quite interested in trust when I noticed the difference that it made to the teams being able to deliver successfully.
Excellent, thank you. I can see more and more audience joining us as we go. If you haven't used this platform before with us, take a little moment to just familiarise yourself with it. Over on the right, you will see places we can chat. A few people started to say hello, and already I can see people from Lisbon, Hungary, Dublin, all over the place. Nice one. Do say hello. There's also down in the right-hand side, you'll see a little question mark bit. That's where you can ask your questions. So Michelle and I are just going to kick off and start this conversation, but do ask your questions as you go. I'm not going to wait until the end and then pile them all in. I will feed your questions in naturally as we just have our conversation. So ask away, and I will put as many questions as I can to Michelle on your behalf. Right, shall we get started then? So we're talking trust and why that comes first. Maybe you could just run us down quickly what that means in that kind of workplace context. What do we mean by trust, psychological safety? Then why is it so important?
Yeah. So, trust, it's really about taking a leap of faith and trusting somebody's going to do what they say they're going to do. They're going to do the right thing. The seminal theory on trust talks about three components: ability, benevolence, and capability, integrity. So, are you capable of doing the thing you should be doing? Are you going to be good to the person? Like, are you going to treat them well, but with benevolence? And then do you act with integrity? Do you do what you're going to say you're going to do, and do the right thing? Um, but if the article that I wrote, it kind of covers some of this, the background, there's so many theories on trust. There's a lot of research on it, but really it looks at trustworthiness. And it is somebody seen as trustworthy, and also your propensity to trust. So some people will have a higher propensity to trust than others, and that might be just your personality, but it might also be informed by past experience. So where you've actually, you know, had a break in trust, and you're now being more careful. It's so I one of the things that I think about is, do you start with trust, or do you believe it needs to be earned? Or, that can be an interesting thing to think about from a personal perspective. And psychological safety was made popular by Amy Edmondson back in 1999, I think it was, when she first talked about it. But it actually has been referenced in academic papers before that as well. Very, not that much, but it's really about understanding that there is another component to safety in the workplace, and it's about the psychological side of it. So, do you feel safe to share your ideas? Do you feel that it's okay to challenge, and show up as yourself, warts and all?
It's going to sound like really like basic question as well there, and I'm going to be like the devil's advocate in the room for a minute. But maybe you could just talk to us a little bit about why it even matters. Certainly my assumption is, my perception is that it's probably something that's changed over time as well, in that 50 odd years ago, they probably wouldn't have been talking about this stuff. And you go to work and you do your job, and what's all the fluffy stuff as well, why is it's definitely a trend. It feels like it's becoming more important to people, and younger generations probably as well. But why does it matter that we need trust in the workplace? Even why can't people just turn up and do the damn job and then go home at the end of the day?
And actually, I think one of the earlier references was back in the 60s, so by Edgar Schein and somebody else. So it's interesting that they were referencing it then. But from my own experience, I mentioned I noticed one of the software engineering teams that I was leading. I was dealing with leaders in the US, and I noticed the teams were getting interrupted all the time with, are you sure you're going to deliver it on time? Lots of seeking reassurance, the illusion of control. um, and I asked this, like I asked all of them, but one product manager actually listened. And I said, can you just trust us? Tell us what the problem is. We're going to fix it. We know what to do. Just trust us. And he did. And that team really, like I could see that they outperformed beyond his expectations. And it really brought it home to me. I hadn't really been as tuned into trust as much as I had after I noticed that. Um, but psychological safety as well, I would have noticed it, but not known what the term was. And I remember being in a group of tech leaders where it was an ideation session. And one of the guys shared how he was going to, um, his plan for, one of the change initiatives. And a more senior, very technical guy kind of tore it to shreds in front of the group and continued on, thought it was grand. He had shared what he thought was the best approach. And after the meeting, I went to him and I said, do you think he's going to share an idea next week? And he was like, what? I said, you basically tore his thing to shreds in front of everybody. Do you think he's going to come in with an idea next week? And he was like, well, I was sharing my perspective. I said, yeah, but you were the most senior person in the room and you knocked his idea, and he did listen. Like he said, okay, fair enough. Thank you for pointing it out. I didn't know the term was psychological safety, but I
Right.
knew there was something that was going on that wasn't going to help with innovation.
Mm. And can you pull back from that as well? Then you said like you gave him that feedback and he's responded to it, but it's one of those that it's easy to break and hard to fix, isn't it? When you start to chip away at some of that trust and that psychological safety for a team.
Yeah, like the Dutch proverb, trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback.
Right.
It's very easy to break trust, and it's hard to repair it. And I do think, in the tech world at the moment, with all the risks and the concerns about, layoffs, it's very hard for people to feel like they've got psychological safety.
Mm,
I keep hearing people talking about, I'm going to keep my head down. I'm going to just stay out of trouble. Um, it's kind of hard for people to share ideas and feel like it's safe for me to take a risk. And
mm,
that is actually one of the things. You're never going to come up with the best innovative ideas if you feel I have to stay safe.
mm. It's interesting as well that the kind of the two-way street of trust. I think often when I guess it's just that default in my head of when I think about trusting teams, what I'm really thinking about is a leader, a manager, an organization trusting the team to to know what they're doing and to deliver when they say they will and to leave them alone to get on with solving the problem. But the two-way street of it is, like you say, people in a keep my head down mode, they have to trust the leader as well and trust the organization and feel safe to do it. So yeah, I think it's often seems a little bit imbalanced sometimes in the way that we talk about it.
Yeah, and years ago, people went to an interview and they were interviewed to see if they had the skills for the role. But now people are interviewing the company to see, is this the kind of company I want to work in? And is this culture going to fit with my values? People are a lot more tuned into that. Where, years ago, people wouldn't have been, and you wouldn't have felt that it was something you could do. But, companies talk a lot more openly about their values now. But, sometimes you'll see values written on a wall that aren't lived. So, people do a lot of research and we're a lot more connected, now we can, I make friends on LinkedIn all the time, and the next thing I'm on a call chatting to people. If I was going to interview for a company, I would connect with somebody and I would talk to them and say, what's it really like? What's the worst thing that what kind of behavior is rewarded? I would have asked lots of questions to figure out what is the culture
Yeah.
in the organization.
Let's lean into a little bit on that as well, because like the whole values on the wall thing is always it's always fun, isn't it? But it's kind of hard to tell, especially in that kind of getting to know you phase, what's real and what's not. And if you're not careful, you end up with, if people are in that mode of keep my head down and just get on with it, you can end up with that kind of that false harmony, surface level, very polite, and oh yes, everything's lovely here and we all trust each other, but actually it's not. So how do you tell the difference between real trust that's going on in an organization and where it is just that kind of surface level?
And actually, what you just said there is a good sign that if everybody's too nice, that's actually a problem.
Right.
It can be a thin veneer over something, a lot of distrust. If people are kind of afraid to question, they're afraid to speak up and say, I don't agree with you. So that's definitely something. I think also like it's asking some of the questions like what is tolerated around here? What's rewarded? What's punished? Who are you not allowed to share feedback with? Who doesn't accept being challenged? Um, I think some of the signs that tell you that it isn't there are silence. So silence can be good. There's lots of silences that can be. There's a reason for silence. But one of the things is, when you share something in a meeting and the silence, that's kind of telling, but also agreement. If everyone's agreeing all the time, that's actually a sign that maybe you don't have psychological safety. People don't feel like they can challenge and speak up. If nobody's telling you about mistakes, if there's no this didn't go according to plan kind of updates, if everything's going fine, it's like that watermelon status, green on the outside, red on the inside. You only find out at the very last minute, and that's so common.
Mm.
So I think it's yeah, I don't know. It's I think also, where so when I was talking about silence, like I think sometimes it's really important to actually create silence so that people can speak. Some people need more time to think of what they're going to say, or people are afraid to bring something up, so they're working up to saying it. So silence can be really good for that point of view. It can be good for allowing somebody else to speak. But if you're noticing those kind of things, or if you notice maybe the atmosphere changes when certain people are on a call or some people walk into the room, that can tell you something too.
Mhm. So then, as a leader, what do you do about it? So you've noticed it. There's the quiet people. They tell you they're fine. They don't want to. You ask them to contribute more, and they're not doing. What can, obviously our audience is mostly made up of technology leaders. They're starting to see it in their teams. What do they do about it?
Yeah, like something I have done in the past with the leaders that I worked with in the engineering group that I was working in, we did a trust survey. So we actually used the questions Amy Edmondson she's shared them. These are questions you can use to understand what the level of psychological safety is in your team. And we also took a few questions from Patrick Lencioni's he's got a lot of questions that you can ask, but we picked the ones that were on trust and psychological safety, and we measured where we were, and we saw it wasn't where we wanted it to be. So then I think it's really important if you ask people for their feedback that you acknowledge and thank them for the feedback first of all, but also that if you're not going to use their idea, that you tell them why, or you tell them, you say, we're not going to do this thing because of whatever. Because a lot of the time people will share ideas, and then if it repeatedly gets ignored or feels like it's falling on deaf ears, they'll just say there's no point, and they won't speak up. So we listened to ideas that people were sharing in the leaders group, and started to implement some of them. But there's so many different things. Um, Being vulnerable as a leader yourself is one, and actually being able to say, "Listen, I need to hear from you. I don't have all the answers. Nobody can have all the answers in today's tech world. Like absolutely nobody has that expertise." And one thing I would have noticed sometimes was, as a director of engineering, I was expected to know everything. I needed to know where the status of everything, and like pushing back on that and saying, I'm going to check with whoever, or I need to talk to somebody else. I need to bring in the principal engineer here. Like being not being afraid, don't let your ego get in the way, I think, and actually saying, I need to bring more people into this conversation. Um, but also, showing the vulnerability, saying, like, I don't have all the answers, I need to hear from you, but also, how do you create a space where all voices can be heard? So that might be like, there's different personality types, there's different communication preferences. So you might be in a meeting where some people need a bit more time to think of things. So maybe sharing information ahead of a meeting and saying, I'm going to hope to hear from all of you in the meeting, or creating more channels for people to share feedback through, and asking questions. Like, people often say, nobody asked my opinion, nobody actually asked me, and it depends. There's cultural differences as well in whether you're going to speak up or whether you'll wait till somebody asks you. So there's a lot of things you need to consider. And I guess also, as a leader, you need to think about, how do you respond when you hear something you don't like, you know and do you think you're encouraging people to continue to give you feedback? You know, so I said acknowledging and thanking people for sharing it, but also you may be defensive, or you might be triggered by something. And maybe that is like, maybe that happens, but you need to then go back and say, listen, I didn't respond very well to that. I was triggered, and have an honest conversation to say, but I really appreciate you shared that. And what can we do about it? I think it's important just to acknowledge that if that does happen to you.
I can imagine that being quite hard for some people as well. It's not something that's going to come naturally to everybody to respond that way to feedback. But I guess it's just a muscle that you have to train, right? The more you do it, the easier it gets.
And there's a very good Harvard Business Review article, the feedback fallacy,
Oh,
where all feedback is not equal, and some feedback is like rubbish. So you need to probably be able to discern that, but your bias might tell you that this one is rubbish because you don't like it, and it's actually triggering something. So, like, seeking feedback from more people and seeing, is there a trend? But also, I always think, even if the person, you think they're entirely wrong with the feedback they've given you, it is the perspective that they have. So what can you change to actually help people to understand something better if they are seeing something that you don't believe is true?
yeah. But I think when I deal with people and we're talking about feedback, I always ask people, um, it's not so much what are you going to change or but what are you going to do with that feedback? Are you going to integrate it? Are you going to choose to ignore it? Are you going to what's your reaction to it? Is what are you going to do with it? How are you going to integrate that into how you are? And yeah, that can take a bit of struggle for some people,
That's
can't it?
actually brilliant, because I have been reassured that people have listened in the past where I've given feedback, and I've like, they really welcomed that feedback, but I haven't actually asked, um, what are you going to do with it? And
Yeah,
that's the missing part, because it's so frustrating then if you feel, I actually took a risk and I shared some feedback, that I didn't know it was going to go well, and now nothing has happened. I'm not going to bother doing that again.
yeah, yeah. That's the kind of thing that can erode that trust in that relationship as well, can't it? Yeah.
Totally.
We have started to get a couple of questions in. By all means, anybody follow the little question mark over on your right and keep asking them. There's a question here which is only a few words, but it's huge. So it's a tiny question, huge topic, but it'll lead us down a couple of interesting avenues, I think. So this is a question from Carol, who says, can you comment on building trust in cross-cultural environments? So if we can, let's talk a little bit about that. But also, I think it ties really nicely into remote working, hybrid working, where you've got people very close to you, so that kind of that proximity issues of people that are the nearest to you. Do you build more relationships? How hard it is when some people are away, some people are not, crossing geographical and cultural boundaries as well. So yeah, huge topic, tiny
Mm.
question, jump in. Where would you like to go?
So I'll talk about the cross-cultural first, but I love the remote one as well. So I don't know if you've read Erin Meyer's book, the culture map, but she has 8 norms, kind of trends of norms on different areas, which people will, it's kind of, yeah, there's different personality types. Everybody's not the same. It sounds a little bit like the stereotypes, but we all know there's certain things that in certain countries and cultures, we have ways of, for example, she talked about where she was speaking in Japan, and she was asking, does anyone have any questions? And there was no questions. But she learned afterwards that actually they make eye contact. You've got to make eye contact and see who looks really energized by what you've just said, and you've got to pick up on that. So understanding those cultural differences is really important. I designed and ran some workshops as part of our trust survey in my previous role as director of engineering, and the first workshops we ran, it was covering trust, psychological safety, candor, radical candor, and it's very interesting, the different quadrants of how we can react or how we can be sharing information. Um, but afterwards, somebody actually gave me really strong feedback about something they didn't like in the workshop, and I said to them, I'm actually annoyed because you've sent me this message in the evening time, telling me what was wrong, but you didn't tell me anything that was right. And, it would have been, it annoyed me.
Mm.
And they said, and I probably was a bit defensive as well. But we had a chat about it the next day, and they said, well, in my culture, um, this person was from Ukraine. They were like, we don't bother telling people what's good. We just tell them what needs to be fixed. But I take it on board. And, yes, I should have told you. I thought it was excellent. There was all these things, but this thing was a problem. But then that conversation, I always think curiosity over judgment. So I try to make it like, even when I'm triggered or pissed off about something, I'm like, what can I learn from this? What can I be curious about? And I thought, oh, we actually need to bring the cultural piece into these workshops because we do share feedback differently. And you know, we had teams in America, we had people in, different countries that had just totally, and we had people from every nationality in our teams as well. So, you're going to have that. So to answer the question, being more explicit. So Erin Meyer shares an example of where if you're from Japan and you're in a meeting, you read the air. You don't need to state the obvious. Um, Somebody from the US will be going, so just to be clear now, Emma, you're going to do whatever, and they're repeating what was said. And somebody from Japan will say, what is wrong with them? Do they think we're stupid? Like, why are they repeating stuff? But the recommendation is when you have cross-cultural communication, being over communication can be helpful because different people need to, making sure everybody understands, asking questions, making sure checking their understanding. But just on the remote working piece, I came across a really interesting piece of research when I was doing my thesis, which is on how tech leaders build and maintain trusting relationships in remote and hybrid work environments. A topic I think is just so, so important. But one of the things that I came across was how we build trust through work related communication and also friendship related. So in an office, people will tend to like have a coffee, the water cooler, whatever. But when people are working remotely, there is this thinking that we need to be really high performance. It's more measured. So they found that people were less likely to engage in one-to-ones with people unless it was necessary for them to do their job. So people that you would have had naturally conversations with in the office, they weren't. So leaders need to signal to people it's expected that you build relationships with your coworkers and you actually have just a virtual coffee. We used to use Donut on Slack where you'd
Yeah.
pair people for virtual coffees, but actually making that important. It's expected. It's not just okay. It's expected that you build relationships with coworkers and others that you know, you might think it's less acceptable in a remote environment.
Yeah, I've always said that, well, gosh, my word, it's scary. 10, 15 years ago now, working, oh my gosh, nearly 15 years ago. And I remember trying to encourage people and trying to get over to people that you have to care about the person that you're working with, and the fact that you only see them for 10 minutes, or even don't see them because they haven't put the camera on, and you're just interacting with them just about business. Like, that's difficult to build
Mhm.
a personal relationship with somebody. So yes, please chat about what was on telly last night, or the football scores, or whatever it may be. You don't just have to talk about work. It's important that you build real personal connections and care about your teammates personally, so that your successes are your shared successes, and your failures are your shared failures. That's how you build a team, isn't it? By being
Yeah.
personally invested with those people.
And that's like relationship versus task, build
Yeah.
trust, building trust through relationships or tasks. And it's cognitive or affective trust. There is my go-to would always be to build a relationship with somebody, get to know the person, and be interested in them, and showing people that you have their back, and actually just being interested, because I think it's hard. You spend so much time in your working life working with people, and if you don't actually show any interest in their lives, like, and then it's also, as a leader, um, being able to understand that somebody needs extra space, or somebody's under pressure with their life. Um, these things in the space of a career are small, but people will remember how you treat them in those situations when they are struggling with something, and giving them space and giving them the support. Um, I think it's just being more humane. And when I talked about ability, benevolence, and integrity, the benevolence, showing that, but also the integrity of doing the right thing for people.
Yeah.
It's not profit over people. Like, and I think it's not an either or either. There's a both and mindset. So it's polarity management. I love that concept. So it's thinking about um, what how do we get the best of both. So it's not an either or, and looking at what do we need to do, what are the things we need to watch out for, so we don't go too far in one direction. um
Mm.
but everything gets done by people. You need to actually care about the people.
I'm going to again do the devil's advocate route slightly, only slightly, because I think we agree on everything. But I'm putting my hat on of, okay, I'm a CTO in an organization. I've got a couple of hundred people, and you can't know everyone. You can't
Hmm.
see everything. You can't be that person. You've got a job to do as well. I mean, I've literally had people have that conversation with me of
Hmm.
like, if I did all of this people stuff, then how am I ever going to do the actual job I'm here to do? But I think there's something about kind of modeling those right behaviors, because eventually you are, and if you're at that kind of scale, you have to be not just a leader of people, but a leader of leaders of
Hmm.
people. And you've got to model that leadership trait, and that curiosity and that personal engagement, so that they become better leaders then in turn as well. But it does sometimes feel like it could be a full-time job in its own right, aside from then also coming up with the strategy for the organization and dealing with your exec team and your peers and everything else as well. Do you not find that some leaders in that position just get exhausted with it, don't have time for it, that it's the first thing that goes when they get busy and get stressed?
Yeah, totally. I think also, though, having skip levels, with people. Reverse mentoring is something I really recommend to senior leaders, because it's really good to hear perspectives of people who are in different roles, and they just have a different outlook on things. Um, Round tables can be helpful as well, but it is important to create psychological safety, where people feel like they will speak up, because people might still be a bit concerned about speaking up even in a round table.
Yeah.
But bringing people into cohorts can be helpful, and I think it's also encouraging your leaders to create those opportunities for people to share feedback, so that you're hearing it from different people. You're hearing what's happening on the ground, but it's also how you respond then when you hear things. I've been in ideation sessions where somebody has just been there a couple of months, has an absolutely brilliant idea. But there can be egos involved with more senior people who think, I know more, and how can that person actually have the best idea? So, you know, I think it's really important that you create the space where, like the hippo highest person paid person's opinion, that it isn't all defaulting to somebody who is there a long time, and
Yeah.
you're not listening to the other generations as well. But it can be, it doesn't have to be younger people either. Like sometimes ageism is a thing, and your opinion is disregarded because you're too old, you couldn't be cool enough to have a good idea. So I think
Yeah.
being open to a broad, diverse group of opinions. And on that topic, I would always say to people, who's not in the room, whose voice isn't being heard. I've seen so often a group of just white men making decisions on product strategy. And I'm like, how can you think that you're going to make the best decisions for creating a product if you don't have,
Mhm.
other opinions in the room?
Mhm. Oh, that's a whole other
Yeah.
lane to on that diversity of thought then, and touching back onto the cultural differences as well. We've got a question that's come up which kind of leads more into that diversity of thinking and different personality types and the way that people interact. So this is a question from Dan, and it's a long one, so bear with me for a moment. It says, regarding the point around some people needing more space to think before sharing their thoughts, I know that there's some contention in this, but do you find things like personality tests, so the Myers-Briggs and things, do they help people understand these kinds of traits in people so that we can be more strategic in supporting different kinds of differences and how people communicate? Would you advocate for those types of exercises and insights, or do you think that it can actually cause more bias and problems as you sort of categorize people, I suppose?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Myers-Briggs, but I think that there is multiple types of personality tests and different questionnaires that you can do, and they can give you insights. I just would always say they're just one data point, and they do, like I remember we did insight preferences, and it was quite accurate. And in a group, we were able to say, okay, when we interact, I'm going to, we could see potential problems, we could see benefits. One thing I did as a result of, I think, was DISC we had done in the leadership group I was in, one guy was nearly the same as me. So if I was going to check somebody's opinion on something, I wouldn't ask him because he's going to just tell me I'm right. I'll
Yeah.
go to somebody else. So, like, I think it gives you some insights. There's a tool that I created with another woman I worked with, Erin Thompson, how I like to work, but it's a it's not a new thing. Lots of people have different versions of these, manual of me, but it's called How I Like to Work. And it's really about self-reflection. So and it's a lot of coaching questions in there, but if you did nothing but just used it and self-reflected, it's helpful. But also, so you might put in results of those sort of questionnaires in there, but there's just one thing, and then you'll put in your own experience. And then if you share it with other people that you work with, it can be really insightful. And I've seen it working in action where it actually helps people to be more tolerant and be more understanding of different quirks and nuances, so it's calling those things out, and it's also fast forwarding relationship building. So you can say what your non-negotiables are, and then you don't have to think on the spot and be stressed about it. For example, for me, I want to eat my lunch away from the desk. So I'm not working through lunch and not eating, or else I'll get hangry. So I've said that up front. And it did happen in a meeting where people were like, well, we just pushed through. And I went, not me. And they continued, and I left and had some food and came back and was much more helpful.
Good for you. Yeah, I've always figured the Myers-Briggs and things of this world. I've always compared it to astrology, to be honest. A lot of people, people that know me know that I don't really buy into it. The only one I really buy into is the sorting hat, and everyone knows I'm a Ravenclaw, so that's fine. Strictly
One of
hope.
my favorites is Belbin team roles,
Oh, yes.
which I really find that good. But we also need to. It's funny when I did that with a team that I led, people started to say, oh, this is the negative side of it. They went straight into that. And I was like, why did you not look at what the benefits are? But we have this default of going into the negative first. But it's helpful to think about those things because one of my top one was resource investigator, bringing information from outside and connecting people. But my second one was plant. And it did actually help me to understand, oh, I have so many thoughts and ideas that can actually stress people out because I'm like onto a new thing. I'm bored with that, and I've lost my train of thought. I'm on a new topic, and that made me a better communicator because I noticed when I interacted with my people leader at the time, his thoughts came out in bullets. He just had it. It was very organized. And he was like, what is she talking about? So I got more organized ahead of my one-to-ones with him, and it helped our
I guess
communication.
the value in that, though, and where these things are useful, is that it helps you think about those character traits and those behaviors where I see it gone too far. And there was one organization I worked with where everybody talked about themselves in terms of colors. Oh, I'm very
Mm.
red. I'm a very red person. Oh, you wouldn't like deal with this person. They're very yellow. And it's like people aren't
No,
like that.
no.
If you can at least focus on the traits and the characteristics and like you're saying, understanding how you communicate better, then that's better than just attaching to labels, probably.
And again, that's just one data point,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay. Do keep your questions coming in as well. As far as the feedback, there's one here as well that's worth, I think, jumping into. So we talked a little bit about how to handle feedback, what to do with it. This is a question from Alex that says, how can you react? How can I react when I asked for feedback as a manager and the feedback I receive is very personal and insulting? So that question of how do I integrate it? What do I do? What if I don't like it? So I mean, there's a story there, isn't there? We should
Mm.
probably get into this with Alex at some point. Like, what happened? Who hurt you? But so the feedback is personal and insulting. What are you supposed to do with that? You actually sit there and say, "Well, thank you for the feedback."
That's like about values and behaviors as well, though, and respect.
Right.
So I don't think feedback should be attacking your personality. It should talk about your behavior.
Yeah.
So, if somebody's saying you are such and such, that's not really helpful. And that might be a training thing, a communication workshop people need to have. And then sometimes there's people who are just, maybe they're not happy for whatever reason and they're in survival mode. So I love the energy project. They have a little quadrant of performance zone, survival zone, um burnout zone and recovery zone. So if you're not going into recovery zone or if you're dealing with like really stressful stuff outside of work, sometimes you're in survival zone and you're actually not at your best. So as a leader, I always say you should understand what zone you're in yourself. Have you been triggered into survival zone? Are you in burnout zone? Um, but also are your people. So what's happening for that person that makes them communicate in that way? Is that how they always do, or is there something going on?
Yeah.
So again, I say curiosity over judgment, and I would be honest and say the way that you've shared this is actually it doesn't feel good for me, but I would be trying to be as curious as possible, just to understand. And then when you know what's going on, you can maybe give more supports, but also say this isn't a I don't accept you speaking to me in this way.
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? And I think it's probably just taking a breath before you react. It's very easy to react in the situation and probably make it worse than if you
I
just sort of,
love coaching questions,
yeah.
like asking questions. Try to be curious and ask what's behind this, what brought you to this. Trying to ask questions. Though somebody messaged me one day on Slack and I was like, oh, for God's sake, I was just really annoyed with what they said. And then I just went, I'm just going to ask them a question. And I realized I had taken it, that wasn't what they meant.
Okay,
So the way they had framed it wasn't, yeah, and they were annoyed about somebody else had annoyed them. But, I always try to start with questions rather than just assuming I know what the person's trying to say.
excellent. Okay, I've got another question, and it feels like it's very like topical. We're all like newsy and in the moment. But actually, I think it leads into where I was going to take this next anyway, which is kind of fixing it when it goes wrong. So you can imagine a situation. We've talked a little bit about sort of judging a culture and understanding what it's really like when you walk in and how to ask those questions. But when trust is breached, like you say, arrives on foot and leaves on horseback. So it's bolted with the horses. There's been a stampede. It's all gone. And the question that Furkan has asked is, what could employers do in a cold place situation to gain back the trust of their employees? And I guess what they mean is, you've seen obviously everyone's seen their wonderful memes going around and things. So we're in a situation then where trust is absolutely breached. They've lost confidence. There's lots of stuff going on behind the scenes, and that trust is broken in an organization. What can you do on a real practical level to start to repair that then as a leader?
Yeah, like I think showing vulnerability and transparency. Like when I did my research, the word that came up the most was transparency. So actually, people are a bit scared of transparency, and I've noticed this across my career. I remember many years ago, when I suggested that we had this, we shared information on an internal internet. Um, all the leaders pushed back. They were like, no, no, we shouldn't show the business areas how much work we're doing or for each person because they'll think they're not getting enough, whatever. And I said, look, if we're making the right decisions, we should be able to stand over what we're doing. And if we're not, then we should be challenged on it, you know. So I believe we should be transparent. And it didn't, nothing happened, you know, when we did it. So I generally think transparency is really important. And actually, you know, getting people like acknowledging what's being open and acknowledging what's not working, what didn't go well. But then like listening to people as well and taking their feedback on board and setting a vision and getting people inspired by the vision. But and showing them that you have their best interests at heart and why it's important. You know, it's a compelling vision, you know. But you need to be honest and open and be open to hearing from people. And also, like sometimes leaders have thought through something and they are like a few steps ahead of in the process than others. So meeting people where they are and actually giving them time to process something and not like sometimes people are like, oh, we just need to move on with the business. We're too busy. We can't be, you know, faffing about with this. But actually, if you don't hear people out, you know, and you know, it can be toxic positivity sometimes, you know, where people are like, I'm a really big fan of positive psychology, but if you don't listen to the problem and listen to how people are feeling, people aren't ready to move on with moving into a solution mode. So you need to hear them. But also, you can get into this venting mode then where everyone's giving out about something and they're not happy. Accountability is really important. I love Cy Wakeman. She talks about, she says, your ego is not your amigo. But one of her things is what shared accountability. So what are you willing to do? And I've seen it in engagement surveys where people are sharing all the things they're not happy with. And then you ask them to be part of the solution and they're like not really willing. They just think leaders need to sort everything, you know. So shared accountability, what are you willing to do to move us forward? And this is what I'm willing to do, and having those conversations.
It's difficult. It's imagining a situation, we talked a little bit about, you know, it's where it's hard for a team, for people to trust the leaders if they're
Mm,
seeing, I can keep my head down, there's layoffs. But there
mm,
are obviously situations where that's the decisions that an organization has to make for the longevity of the company. To how do they not just, I guess, repair trust when it's gone wrong, but maintain trust through a very transparent, very open look, we're in trouble, we're not making the money that we need to, I need to go and make these decisions. How do you maintain trust? Is it as simple as just transparency and being honest and sincere and authentic can take you through that and avoid that kind of downward spiral? But it's difficult to ride through that very bumpy road for the, say, those tough decisions that organizations have to make. They still, what you see is once they start to make redundancies, say, and make layoffs,
mm.
then it's not just those people that go, is it? It's everybody else as well. Start to see the writing on the wall, and they don't feel like they're part of it anymore, and it becomes that negative spiral down, and the damage can be a lot more lasting than just the couple of months as they work through that kind of difficult patch as well. So how do they struggle through those harder moments too?
Yeah, like I think I've looked at a lot of research on layoffs and the impact of them. And, there's a lot of research that points to some organizations, many organizations never recover financially even. And the trust can be broken because the people who, well, it depends on do they have trust in the leaders? If the leaders got them to the place where they had to lay people off, are they not doing their job properly? Is there survivors are concerned that they're next. Also, they might see a really excellent co-worker getting laid off, and they think if that person can go be laid off, then anyone can, and then it makes them feel like they've no security, and then it leads to people playing safe, and then there's no innovation. So it's actually nearly a self-fulfilling prophecy. But what you said there, active trust building is actually really important, and it's much better than trying to repair it. So being more transparent and keeping maintaining trust is a much better approach if you can do it. And I think also like people need hope as well and optimism.
Mm.
So, only telling people about the what's going wrong can be challenging as well. But I do think it's really, really important to be as open as you can and treat people like adults. People often say, oh, you need to protect the team. And yes, protect them from noise and nonsense. But like you treat people like children, they'll act like children. And like it's something that I repeatedly apologize in advance and say, I'm going to be really transparent. But if I'm too transparent, tell me, because I think that's the best approach. But maybe some people don't want it. But being as transparent as you can. But also, like, if you're listening to people and you're listening to all the great ideas that are in the organization, you'll have a better chance of actually not getting into the situation where you have to lay people off. And Simon Sinek has a really good video on it, empathy and layoffs, and he says making a decision to have redundancy should be an excruciatingly hard decision, and it shouldn't really be made when you're still making a profit. You should be redeploying people. You should be figuring out what can people, is there another role that they can do? And has become, I think in tech, we see so many copycat antics where people actually, oh, that's what they're doing. And the same with RTO. We know the data. Nick Bloom has so much data on it. And the situation is not what the media is telling. There's a lot more companies that have flexibility than you would believe from what you hear in the media. People need to be a bit more courageous as leaders and actually stand up and not just follow.
Interesting. What about the other way round for a minute as well? I think we've got just for benefit of the audience as well, because I'm going to get completely lost in this conversation and completely lose track of time. We've got about 10 minutes left. So if there's any other questions that you want to pop into the question mark bit, then do add any more in just in this last 10 minutes. But let's think about the other way around for a minute. So we've spoken quite a lot about, as a leader, what you can do to try and build that culture of trust and repair it and maintain it through difficult times. What about then as somebody in a team, or maybe you are still a leader, but you're a team leader, you're part of a much bigger machine, or you've joined an organization, you like to work in a very high trust kind of way, but the culture of the organization that you've joined isn't like that. You're working for somebody that doesn't offer that trust initially and that trust first. And I've heard plenty of leaders say that their trust has to be earned, not given, and all that. What can you do to influence that as a cog in the machine? It's like the small bit player in the one corner of the big picture. What can you start to do to try and change that?
Yeah, and I would start with the tone is set by the top. So, if you want to change, if you want proper organizational change, you really do need buy-in from the top. But that said, you can create pockets of psychological safety. I have managed to do this in roles that I've been in. I think trust begets trust. So, like that this whole conversation is called It Starts with Trust. And so when I was talking about leaders being transparent, but also showing trust, because trust is, to quote Denise Russo, trust is a substitute for control. So if you don't trust, you micromanage, you end up, people have no autonomy, they don't feel as engaged, it starts a spiral of behaviors. Um, so within teams, like, and depending on, you can start to model the behaviors that you want to see, and you can be more explicit and open and talk about it. Because then people will, you start more conversations. And, I've been in situations where somebody has been moved into my team and they didn't feel trusted. And I committed to trusting them from the start and assuming that they're going assuming good intentions. Um, for example, like, at one stage I was in a role where the company changed the hours, so people had to do an extra, I don't know, it was an hour or so in the week. And one of the leaders above me said to me, "How are you going to make sure people are doing their hours?" And I said, "I'm not. I'm not wasting my energy on that. That's ridiculous." And they were like, "But we've been told by HR we need to make sure." And I was like, "Waste of energy." I talked to my team and said, "This is what's expected. I trust you're going to do it. Don't screw up my trust, and that's it. No more." And I think if you show the trust, people will start to, it creates another kind of a dynamic. So as you do it more and you talk to people, I did work in you can have like different cultures within subcultures in a company, but at one stage I noticed everybody was just like, no one was being honest. So I just started having honest conversations and started saying, when this happens, this is how I feel. And then others started to be more honest and open. So I think you can influence how people are acting, by being more open yourself.
I guess you start with that little bubble, don't you? And you start to try and see how big you can make that bubble grow. I was at an organisation once. They used to have they started an awkward conversations club where they would just get together, like just talk about all the things that no one else was talking about. Like, let's just dig into this a little bit, which is always interesting. Okay. So yeah, we've got about 5-10 minutes left, a little bit more now. So how do we wrap this conversation up then, Michelle? Where do people go from here? So they've been listening in to us talk, they're excited about it, they want to start making a difference when they get back. How can they start? How do you get going? Where do they go for more information? Where do they start to build that kind of culture then in their organization? Step one, what do they do tomorrow?
Yeah. I share that. I know I wrote the article ahead of this, so that has actually got some resources in it as well. I love the Amy Edmondson, like this, she's many videos, but where she talks about how her research, she expected to find the high performing teams made the least mistakes, but it was the opposite because they were able to admit their mistakes and speak up. So I would say, like reading up on it and understanding it a bit more, having conversations with people, maybe even, trying to assess get the data. I always think start with the data. I have a few articles on my website as well. The first article I put up when I launched the Leading Place was leadership in roundabouts, and it was because I'd listened to a talk. Mihai Pawn, a guy I used to work with, he feeds me with information. He sends on brilliant articles all the time, but he sent me a video of a guy speaking, and he talked about, are you a lead? Are you a roundabout, or maybe this is what I took out of it, roundabouts or traffic lights? So, and it was such a light bulb moment for me. So, are you somebody who is actually controlling and telling people what to do? I don't trust you to get your way through this junction. I have to put a traffic light there. Or do you allow people to
I like that.
join the roundabout? And I like, even as yourself, thinking about where do you not trust people? And how can you actually start with trust more?
That's interesting. And we do have one more question that's popped up as well. Do you think, so this is from Dan, do you think that organizational leaders, so execs, will change to focus on hiring people that live that kind of leadership style. So big focus on people, trust, safety, culture, process, etc. Seems like there is still a big focus on the vast majority of companies focusing on hands-on tech expertise over people skills. Are you starting to see a shift, do you think, in organizations in their hiring patterns, or yeah, how do you see that?
I would say over my career, I've seen different approaches, but it can tend to differ even depending on the organization as well, and the leaders and the culture within the organization. Um, with AI now, there's so much like uncertainty, and I've watched a lot of and read up on, how do you actually help junior engineers? Because if you replace what they do with AI, how do you become a senior engineer? So, you need to be intentional is one of the words I love to use, and think about the longer term impact. So there's so much short term thinking, and it actually, you end up paying the cost. You pay a price for that. Um, I think that I was really reassured when I did my research. I spoke to a lot of progressive leaders, and in tech, and I was really reassured because sometimes you come across, headlines, but like bad news sells. So you hear about the bad stuff, and I would love to see us showcasing more of the great things that people are doing in companies. And my thesis, I actually gathered some recommendations, which I will start to write about. Um, on how you can be more transparent, how you can actually create those cultures that attract those people. But I think there's lies that there's myths that people believe. And, somebody said to me, as you get more senior, you need to care more about the business and less about the people. And I said, I fundamentally disagree. It's people. You need people, and you need to actually, no matter what your level is, you need to care about the people. So I think setting that tone and looking at organizations that work that way is a good place to start.
That's interesting. I can't imagine somebody saying that or how I would react.
They thought they were giving me good advice. I was like, I don't think so, love.
I guess there's also that level of okay, so you're a CTO now, and with anyone that's read Five Dysfunctions of a Team and things will know that really start to talk about your peers being your first
Mm,
team rather than the
mhm.
people that are actually working for you in your particular area. That's a whole different dynamic as well, isn't it? And how you manage and try and grow that trust in your peer group, which is probably not something to dig into with just a couple of minutes to go. But yeah, if you got any thoughts on that succinctly,
But
would be
engaging, like that's what I talked about earlier about, having one-to-ones with people that aren't actually in
right.
your team or someone, um, ha- I was very intentional about building relationships with different people at different levels in the org, and I would have like proactively set up one-to-ones with, say, the VP of architecture, VP of different areas that I was dealing with, and they all were fine to meet me and talk to me about what they were doing, and then it helped me to understand how my team was going to help, how it fitted in. So I think being proactive about building relationships with other people is absolutely vital. And really, I've watched people who have had challenges getting new roles by applying through online platforms. We get jobs through people. So, like having the chats with people when you're looking for a new role, talking to people, keeping your relationships. And people don't like the word networking, but it's just talking to people, and just actually being proactive about that is really important. And it's easy for us to forget about that when we're working remotely. We can just say, I just need to get through my work. But you actually do need to invest in relationship building.
Yeah, and it's the same as say whether you're networking to go help find a new job or if you're in an organization, it has to be done genuine curiosity and authenticity because people can tell when it's fake and it's
Totally.
just yeah.
Yeah. And I always start with, how can I help? How can I help you? And people, like, I've been really, really delighted with the amount of people who have like contacted me and said, how can I help you with your business? Can I introduce you to someone who might want and I'm like, that's just fabulous. So I just think if you try and help others, it will come back to you.
Excellent. Perfect thought to wrap up on actually as well, then, because we're about to close out. Just so people can see, I'm sure you've checked in the chat already. I've popped on LinkedIn connections for myself and Michelle there. Emily from CTO Craft has put in a bunch of links as well with some of the recommendations that Michelle has made. If you're not part of the CTO Craft Slack community, then do join us, and we quite often carry on the conversations in there too. And we'll make sure that we share links and things afterwards. Michelle, thank you so much for joining today. Any final thoughts you want to just wrap up for people? Or I think it's been a really good conversation. I have to say, it's been such a positive conversation. It's been a really upward spiral day today rather than downward spiral. I think from my perspective, it's been great. But yeah.
Yeah, like for my one piece of advice is start with trust. And actually, the research shows that you will be wrong as much as somebody who doesn't start with trust. But the person who doesn't start with trust loses out on a lot of opportunities. And the one thing I want to say is I'm loving looking at the chat, how, people are responding to each other's questions. Always remember you can create a network of supporters for people in your teams as well.
Excellent. Great thoughts. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Michelle. Thanks everyone for joining us. I will end the recording there, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.